take a walk with me, not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining me today. Super excited about our guest today. I don't know about anybody else. I just get excited when we get back to the mitten. Now, for those, again, that are geographically challenged, you might not know what that is, so let me help you. That is the great state of Michigan. Now, whether you're a Spartan, whether you're a Wolverine, whether you're a Chippewa, Chickwood, I don't know. I'm now making up names, but whatever you are, you're welcomed in the mitten. There is room for all. It's not the warmest place, but their hearts are definitely warm. So help me welcome in my new friend, Danielle. Danielle, how are you today?
I am fantastic. How are you?
Well, I kind of steal a little bit from Dave Ramsey. I always say better than I deserve, but then somebody said that sounds real like snarky and conceited almost. So I don't know. I still am on the verge of changing something, but I really just love it because I feel like so many times in life there is few things I truly deserve. So maybe you could speak to that today and maybe help me with that.
It sounds canned. When I hear someone say something like that, it just sounds canned. It doesn't sound real.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like it almost sounds snarky, not real, not genuine.
And I'm all about genuine, so.
And I try to be too. And so again, that's why I'm thinking I need a new catchphrase or a new like retort to someone's, well, how are you today? We'll put research on that, see what they can come up with. So, Danielle, you again are in the mitten, which we like to lovingly call Michigan. Are you a Wolverine? Are you a Spartan? Or is any of that on your radar?
Well, I am a go blue person because my husband is. And somehow I just like inherited it. It's not really like I have it hard and deep inside of me. It's more like it rubbed off from the family around me.
So it's not like you can like sing Hail to the Victors really well.
I probably could. Or maybe not the whole thing, but I could start it anyway.
Well, that was our high school fight song, by the way, was Hail to the Victors. So I've always had kind of an appreciation for that song because in band camp, yes, that's right, I went to band camp. We played it probably a million times. Sounds really good on the trumpet, at least it did in my memory.
Oh, is that what you played was a trumpet?
Trumpet and baritone. That was my musical, that was it. That was all. And we're done now, so we're moving on.
You've done that phase of your life and you're over.
I've done that page. That chapter's written. We can now move on to chapter 17, whatever we are on now. Well, Danielle, help us with this because we love to lead off every show really with this question, and that's this: what style of shoe do you love to wear?
Style of shoe would be my tennis shoes. I love Rocket Dog.
Okay, tell me more about Rocket Dog.
I even have Rocket Dog boots. Rocket Dog shoes, I love them because I used to love wearing tennis shoes and that are leather, and they all came. They were when they came up, and this brand or that brand and all that jazz. But I had trouble with my feet. They would give me athlete's feet. And Rocket Dog tennis shoes are made out of canvas. I discovered that it was because my feet couldn't breathe. My feet needed to be able to breathe, and the leather and the fake leather, it traps it in there. When I wear something else for too long a period of time, it bothers my feet. My feet need to be able to breathe. I like Crocs too, but Rocket Dogs are my favorite because they are wider. They even have a new one that has a memory foam thing, so they're super comfortable. And they come in all different kinds of colors and designs, and so I can be creative with them also. So I love my Rocket Dogs.
Amazon them. That's a new phrase we're trying to get into the vernacular. Instead of Googling, you say Amazoned, which is basically you just searched them on Amazon. They're fun. They got some fun colors. Now, these are just girl shoes, right? These aren't like boy shoes. Asking for a friend, of course, not for me.
I don't know. I never looked.
Well, there's like a video playing right now of a dog wearing them. It's kind of weird. Maybe that's a different company. But Rocket Dog shoes. I'm gonna have to look into that. That's fun stuff. Well, so getting into you and your kind of story and what you're about, what about this impact, this footprint, this imprint, what about that kind of resonated with you that made you kind of want to pursue coming on and really sharing your story?
I have many imprints. I was thinking about it before we were going to get together because there are so many, but I have the one that was very pivotal to my life, which was something that happened to me as a child. I'm a childhood trauma survivor, multiple ones, but there is one that in my book, Emerging with Wings, is a matter of chapter 9, which is titled Bullseye. And a bullseye is the highest achievement damage that can be done. And that's what this imprint was a trauma that took place in the church. And I didn't like the idea of focusing on something that would be negative. Out of that, what has been born of what I do, because God has been so faithful to pursue me and to heal that wound and to convince me the opposite of the lie that I believed when that took place over many, 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 many years. I wanted to focus on the love of God. That's the imprint on my life. I remember the morning when I had arrived at really believing the love of God, because that imprint from when I was a child, it drove a lie deep into my soul that I believed that God threw me away. I had no value and I didn't have the right to exist, and I would be rejected everywhere I went. Grew up that way. It permeated every aspect of my life, and I didn't realize that until the Lord showed me that, because he took me through layers and layers to get to the core of that wound, because it was so deep. And when he opened my eyes to how deep it went and what I really believed, I just gasped, because I was just in shock of how pervasive it affected my life. And I am on a mission to share that love. Part of the subtitle of my book is The Love That Heals. And love heals. And I want people to know this. I want people to know they are worthy of love. They deserve love. Going back to what you said, what you deserve. You deserve to know you're loved. You deserve to feel love. That's something that every human deserves, to feel love. That's how God created us. I think about it more and more. The longer I do this, the more I learn, the deeper my revelations get, the deeper my convictions get about how I feel, what's happened to me, and what other people deserve. You know, the Bible says that God is love. It says that we're created in his image and in his likeness. So that means we're created out of love. And so that's why love is our greatest need. And we deserve to know we're loved. Every child deserves to grow up knowing that they are loved. And I want people to know this. They deserve that, because they were created for that purpose, to be loved and to love. That's why we exist.
All right, Danielle. So we just met. So I don't know if I can really push back on anything you're saying yet.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. One of the things on the pile in my life is I would have people who would ghost me. I'd invite them over for dinner and they just wouldn't show up. My best friend did that to me multiple times, where people would just not be there, not show up, not do what they said. God has healed my heart of that.
So for me, not that it's about me in this moment, I often use myself as kind of a placeholder for someone else. Maybe I'm the placeholder for the listener. For me, I grew up in the church. I joke that I was an Awana kid. Most people know what that is. If you've been around the church, you kind of know what that is. Jokingly say I walked the aisle at 9 years old with the whole intention that I knew I was going to be up front, because for whatever reason, I don't know why, I don't know where it's coming from, but I wanted to be noticed and I wanted to be seen. To flip that, you could go deeper and say, well, maybe it's because I wasn't feeling love, I wasn't feeling validated, I wasn't feeling accepted. Probably all that in there, I would imagine. Is love different than acceptance, I guess is my question. Because when I hear everyone deserves love, I agree with that. But does everyone deserve that same type of acceptance?
I guess I don't know what you mean by acceptance.
I can love anyone, but I don't necessarily have to accept them into my life, into who I am. Somebody who is a white supremacist, way against what I believe in, way against anything that they're about. I don't know a lot of people who are white supremacists. I don't even know really their belief system. Truly, I don't. They think they're the master race. That's about all I know. But I can love that person, but I don't necessarily have to accept who they are.
Like agree with them? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe that's it. Maybe is agree, accept the same thing? I don't know.
I don't know. You don't have to agree with them, no. I'm remembering a situation that maybe this will help draw the picture. Because I wrote an article years ago and then searched for some articles to elaborate on it in a video. And I found this one video. I was writing about forgiveness. There was this gentleman who showed up at a sentencing hearing for a serial killer who had murdered his daughter. There were many people at this sentencing hearing who were parents of murdered children. And they were spewing the most vile things because they were angry. This man had, murdered their kid. You understand that emotion. But this one man came forward and said that because he was a Christian and because he was a believer, then he has to do what Jesus tells him to do. He has to act on his faith or it's not real. I don't remember like his speech to the man or anything exactly, but it left a deep imprint on me that day. So here's another imprint. Told the man, I forgive you. What you did was not right. I don't validate what you did that was right. And you get whatever you get today. I forgive you because Jesus Christ forgives me. Whether you accept that or not, that's not my business. That's not up to me. I am going to forgive you because God forgave me. And I see that as an act of love. What that other man did to respond, they didn't have it. He just sat there because, he was probably kind of people who don't have emotions, can't respond to that. Just they're broken. I think people who do things like that are just broken. But this man forgave him. And I cannot imagine how painful that was for him to do that. I had to do that in a much lesser scale when a man hurt my son through something he had done. He hurt him in his career and emotionally, and God spoke to my heart to forgive this man and to bless him, to speak a blessing over him. And I did that with tears streaming down my face because it hurt so bad, but that's an act of love. So I guess love is to speak that love to someone else, to wish them well and truth and light. Love doesn't injure things. So this man who's murdering, that's not an act of love. That's an act of hate. That's the whole acceptance thing and love thing. It's like, no, you don't have to accept what they do if it's wrong. To love them is to speak good things over them, to think well of them, to not sit in the seat of judgment of them because that's not mine to judge kind of thing. I mean, my name, Danielle, is evidence of that. In 1988, I legally changed my first name. Danielle is not the name that I was given when I was born. My original name was connected to trauma, and my mom was the one who actually suggested me to change my name, which is a really strange thing to do, to think about it, to consider picking your own name. But I went through the process of it and prayed about it and stuff. And the name Danielle means God is my judge. And God gave me that gift as that name as a gift because he told me that no one has the right to judge me. I don't have the right to even judge myself. Only God has that right. But even that judgment he put on Jesus. My name is a name of freedom. So that's an act of love toward me.
I go back to this idea that I can love someone, but I don't have to love their choice. I don't have to love who they are. I don't have to accept who they are. And I think there's maybe the difference.
Yeah, because I'm seeing how you're using the word accept as like support or encourage them in a negative thing or a bad thing or a harmful thing.
Like an endorsement almost.
Yeah, say, I don't believe that. No, I have a friend who, she has a group called Moms of Addicted Loved Ones. And she's on a mission to reach 1 million moms to support them because she talks about the illness of addiction. And because she was raising 2 of her grandchildren because her son had suffered addiction and lost custody of his daughters for a while. She had to learn how to love her son in a good and positive way that would encourage him to wellness, not to accept him in a way to support his addiction, but to help him come out of it. So love wants to encourage someone to do what's best for them, what's good and healthy and productive and right.
I think that's maybe where it's at is, again, you can love the person. You don't necessarily have to accept what they're about. Mm-hmm. That's the challenge in the English language I have found repeatedly is the words we think we know what they mean. Mm-hmm. I'll use an example. Somebody said to me recently, well, that's never going to happen for you. That's never going to be whatever. And I was like, wow, never? And he's like, yeah, I chose the word never for a reason. Like, it's never going to happen. Well, what's your definition of never and my definition? Well, never means maybe not right now. I was like, well, that's not what never means. Never means never, ever, ever. Like, never, it's done. That door's shut. It's not going to happen. That's what never means. Well, never means not right now.
But that's not what it means.
That's not what never means.
That's just like forever. Marriage is supposed to be forever. I got married. My husband and I talked about that, about the word forever. And I told that to my children too before they got married. I said, you got to deal with that word forever, because this isn't as long as we both shall feel like it. As long as we both shall fill in the blank of what makes me happy. It's supposed to be as long as you both shall live. I interviewed on my podcast, and she took care of her husband when he had Parkinson, and she did it because she vowed to do that. And some people, they abandon their spouse when something gets hard like that. Vowing forever, I mean, that is a hard thing to swallow. And there is a time for divorce. So I'm not an anti-divorce thing. There is a time. Abuse is not tolerable. There are reasons for it. But there are those who enter marriage with as long as we both feel like, which is a far cry from forever.
I think it's just good to have the right definition or the proper definition, or what are you meaning by that? And I think that's where I think truly a lot of our world's problems, I bet, could probably be solved if we just sat down and said, okay, what's your concept of love? What's your concept of acceptance? What's your concept of desire? What's your concept of never? Using my example. But you talk about your name change. That's interesting. That's a new fun fact for me about you. What was your birth name?
My birth name was Diane.
Speaking of things meaning things, what does Diane mean to you when you hear that name?
I don't know really how to answer that because of what it has meant. What it means by definition is goddess or something like that. I don't know.
Not by the definition. We do a baby search name. Like, what did it mean to you?
It was trauma. It was validation of my greatest fear and a lie that I believed. It was my counselor who opened my eyes to it was connected to a lie, because I didn't realize that. When I was talking to her about growing up, because one of my traumas is something called childhood emotional neglect. And what that is every child has a certain amount of nurture that they need. And they're all different, because kids are all different. And if a child does not get the nurture they need, either over the long course or in very key points of time when they needed something and they didn't get what they needed, leaves a vacuum there. They don't even know it's missing because it's not something that happened. It's something that didn't happen that they needed to happen. So there's a big hole. And I had that. I grew up feeling unloved and unwanted. So then when the incident occurred with my name, with a bully that I write about in my book, and she was screaming at me, using my name against me, and it was founded on all my other beliefs that I had, that I was unloved and unwanted. My parents didn't want me because I felt like maybe I was adopted was what I was. Maybe that's why I feel this way, because I didn't know why I felt this way. I just felt like I was not wanted. And I was told sometime in my life that, I was a mistake. I was an accident. It was unplanned and all of that. But it was all on piles of things. It wasn't just the one thing. When I explained to my counselor about this, she asked me why. I'm like, I don't know why. And then when I told her about what happened with the bully and my name, she's like, well, why did you believe her? And I'm like, wow, because it was founded on all those other lies that my parents didn't love me because my parents did love me. I just had that neglect in my life because I had conversations with my mom before she passed that shed light on some of my upbringing. But what the bully yelled at me, and I have it on my podcast, it's my premiere podcast episode where I share the whole story of my name change. But believing that my parents didn't love me, how she was screaming in my face, it was a very emotional time, and I dissociated after it also. She was screaming in my face that my parents did not want me. They never wanted me. And so that is why they chose that name, Diane. They chose that name so that every time they said my name, they were telling me to die. They were saying, die, Ann, die, Ann. And so when I hear the name now, it's in the past. After I changed my name, it would trigger me when I would hear the name. There were people who refused to use my new name, who said that I was even being disrespectful to my parents because I changed my name. It was my mom's idea. And it was against God to do that. Well, I'm like, God changed Simon's name to Peter and Abram to Abraham. And so it's like, it didn't make sense with these things. The onslaught came against me after I changed my name and before my name, because your name is what represents who you are. And it was the closest thing to home. It was trying to steal my identity. And I felt like I didn't have the right to exist. Drawing breath, I felt was stealing. It was something I did not have the right to do, was even exist. And that took me years to say out loud. And I said it out loud in a group once. I was in this small little group. We called it Safe Group. I'd never shared deep things like that with people before, but I dared to in that little group. And I found that there was another person in that group that felt the exact same way. That was very key to me, because our wounds and our hurts Trauma is personal. I wrote about that in my book, and that's why we need to address it. We need to own the truth of it so that we can heal of it, but we're not alone in it. We're not alone, and something that has hurt me has probably hurt someone else, and it will be a variation of a theme because I'm different and they're different. People suffer trauma, and love is what will heal it.
How old were you when this bully verbally assaulted you with your name?
I believe it was 6th grade, so I was 11. The same age of the incident that happened at the church also, where I was publicly rejected in front of the entire church.
Do you think those incidents are maybe linked to a lot of trauma?
Oh, definitely. They're two of many.
I mean, I've been doing this 4 years now. I've encountered now 2 guests who have changed their name. You're the second for various reasons. I remember 6th grade, sadly, at 42. Friends tease all the time that I have this crazy ability to remember the past. And then somebody pushed back recently and said, how do you know that your past truly happened? Because your feelings can give you wrong directions. They can give you wrong emotions. And I said, because I know it hurt. I know it happened. And they said, well, how do you know you're not lying to yourself? If somebody says that to you, what do you say in that moment back? That none of that was really trauma, that a lot of it was just you in your head and it was made up and what you're feeling isn't true. You're lying to yourself. What do you say to all that? Because I didn't have a response. I literally sat there and was like, what? That was my response, was what?
I would laugh like I just did. How to tell me that what I went through didn't happen, that why would I make up something awful to torment myself?
Yeah, some would say you just wanted the entertainment.
It's ludicrous to even entertain that thought. It's like people attack people. Some people attack people who go through therapy and discover that they were molested. And then when that came out back in the 80s or 90s, when they started doing EMDR and stuff, I don't remember the dates of that. I have a friend who I recently read her book, so it's kind of fresh on my mind. And people will say that it didn't really happen. You just made it up and the counselor made it up. It's like, no. She explains it so much better than I could. I have another friend, she went through that too, and her family just threw her away for a while because they said she made it up. It's like, why would people make up something so awful? It's ridiculous for someone to entertain the thought that someone would do that on purpose. That's why people keep it quiet, because all the shame that people will hurl at you if you dare to bring that out into the light. Why would I put myself through shame for no reason? Shame is not an enjoyable thing to feel. People don't want to feel shame on purpose.
I think a lot of it comes from people saying, well, you're just starved for attention, so you're going to use anything. And again, I'm speaking hypothetically here. I'm not speaking you specifically. This is not a you statement. This is a maybe statement. I think a lot of people say, well, it's because you're so starved for attention, you're going to make up a fabricated story or an embellished story to get people to make you feel sorry for you, to then, woe is me, oh, let me come and love you more. Had this terrible thing happen to you, and you're begging for attention or starved for attention. And so therefore you make up this story or stories that has happened to you, and it's maybe not how you remembered it. It wasn't as bad as you thought it was.
Well, I want to speak to that starved for attention thing, because if someone is starved for attention, there's a reason. There's something that went terribly wrong. To use the words of my therapist, something went terribly wrong. Babies come out needy. We have to feed them and we have to take care of them. Humans have needs. It's something that I had to learn was okay to have, was having needs. It's human to have needs, and it is human to need attention. There's no shame in needing attention. Everyone needs attention. So if someone is starved for it, they are lacking something that needs to be addressed, so they will stop starving. Like children, there's malnourishment, to think about it physically. I'm not a doctor. Start with that. I'm not a doctor. But I have read enough to know that come across a malnourished child, the ones that are all skin and bones, you can't just feed them regular. They have a condition going on inside of their body now that has to be dealt with to bring them back to health. You don't just give them a steak dinner. That will not fix it. They have to be healed of the malnourishment before they can eat normally like regular people. It's that way emotionally.
I agree with that. And again, I think there are others who have said, well, you know what, you're just misremembering. I never know what to say to that. You know, my parents were great people. They truly were. My mom comes from a lot of trauma. Her dad died at 6 months old, and she was told her whole life she wasn't good enough. It was her fault that he took his life. That's a lot of things to pile on a kid.
Yeah, that's awful.
My dad comes from a very abusive home. His dad was chronic alcoholic, a chronic gambler, was very physically, verbally abusive to not only my grandmother, but to him and his siblings. So he grew up in a lot of trauma. Now they get together, they get married, they have kids, they both have their careers. My dad's a retired United States Marine. My mom has been in childcare forever, taking care of other people's kids. But that takes a lot of work. Those two careers take a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of emotions get expensed. And then you come home, and what do you have left in the tank as a Marine after seeing all the trauma that he goes through on a combat zone or protecting our country? My mom pouring into kids all day. How much left does she have left for her kids? Not a lot, I would imagine.
Well, the bottom line is with you is, did you get what you needed?
I would say no to that.
That's one of the things that I address. And people like you, who my parents were great and they were wonderful, but if you suffered emotional neglect, you suffered emotional neglect. I don't care how wonderful they were. If you wanted to learn baseball, but I don't know how to play baseball, you never learned to play baseball. It's just a fact. And people won't deal with their own trauma, their own emotional neglect, because they look to their parents and say, well, my parents were good and my parents loved me. I'm not saying they didn't. My parents loved me. I learned that, but I still suffered emotional neglect that made me a target for the various other bullies, because I had multiple bullies, I had multiple deaths, I had multiple traumatic situations, various home, at church, at school, in the neighborhood, all over the place. When the things pile on each other, it just makes you go deeper. And what I encourage people is to own your own trauma and to own your own emotional neglect. You don't have to throw your parents under the bus. They were human. Did they do the best they could? Wonderful. Say, thank you. You did the best you could. I really appreciate that. I need to learn this. I need to learn that. I needed this. And you deal with where you are now. And the people who would come at you and say, you're just making that up. You're starved for attention. That didn't really happen. You're making a big deal out of nothing. My answer, after we're talking through it, is who are you to invalidate my life experience? Who do you think you are to take that position to judge how I think and how I feel? My life, my mind, my emotions, my thoughts, those are mine. They're not yours. And so I got to deal with our life flows from inside of ourselves. That's where our life comes out of. We're spirit beings. It happens in our mind and in our emotions, and that's where our life is at. And whether let's just say, for the sake of argument, I did remember it all wrong. I'm still suffering and I still need to deal with those things to heal so that I can come out and live a healthy life and retrain my mind how to think and learn how to listen to my emotions and interact with them. I use the word skill in my more recent book, Because You Matter, because I like that word. It sounds like a good thing to have with emotions. A lot of times people will talk about managing them or ruling over them or these other things that have a negative sound, as if emotions are bad. They're not bad. They just are, and they're a part of our life. And Dr. Caroline Leaf calls them messengers. I really like that because they're trying to tell you something. Pain is trying to tell you something. If we didn't have pain, we wouldn't know. Like if I was burning my hand on the stove and it didn't hurt, then I wouldn't know I was burning my hand on the stove. Pain is something that's telling us something. So to just shut down pain is to shut down what it's trying to tell you. Good if you know what it's trying to tell you, and then maybe you can take some pain medicine and then deal with what you're dealing with. Doesn't mean live in the pain, but we need to listen to what is going on inside of us so that we can address it, so we can live a healthy, thriving life.
Feelings aren't facts. What comes to mind?
Comes to mind English. Let's talk about the English language and what those words mean. Feelings aren't facts. I would say yes, they are, and no, they're not. Both. Because what you feel is what you feel. That is a fact. If you're feeling afraid, you're feeling afraid. If you're feeling angry, you're feeling angry. It is a fact. Is it an accurate reflection of what is going on around you? Maybe not. Maybe. Trauma triggers send you back to when you were being traumatized. And you are not currently being traumatized when you're being triggered. You're not back there. When I was triggered triggered back to when I was 6 years old. I was singing on a stage. I got triggered back to when I was 6 years old. Well, I wasn't 6 years old. I was an adult on the stage. So my feeling was a fact in the feeling area, but it wasn't a fact in what was happening to me.
Somebody has said that repeatedly, is that your feelings are not facts. Facts to me scream out indisputable proof. That is a fact. It is a fact that we need the sun to get nourishment, to get some vitamin D. It is a fact that the sun warms us. That is a fact. It is a fact that water is wet unless it is frozen, then it is cold. These are some undisputable facts. It is a fact that I will most likely cry during the North Carolina basketball season this year at some point in time. That is a fact. Okay? That is some facts. It is a fact that I will love my wife. I should have led with that first, but it is a fact that I will love my wife as long as I live. That is a fact. Those are some indisputable facts. Now, I go back to this because I heard it in a rap song. And I don't know how people feel about rap songs, but I like them. So that's all that matters. But it's this song that I heard from this guy, and he says, your feelings can sometimes give wrong directions. And I was like, wait, what did he say? Rewind it. Here's the rap again. Da, 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 da. Your feelings can sometimes give wrong directions. I'm like, and I look it up on the internet. I'm like, okay, the internet, it's got to be right because that's where we go for all things knowledgeable. Speaking of facts, I read it on the internet, so it's got to be true. That's a fact.
No.
I'm joking, of course, as well.
The internet lies.
Truly, right? Is our feelings can lie to us, I think. Our feelings can deceive us. I mean, you strike me as a person of faith. I mean, you are. You've claimed that you are. That is a fact. Going back to that statement. The Bible says the heart is deceptively wicked. Who can discern it? So if my heart is truly deceptively wicked and my feelings come out of my heart and out of my emotions, which is a fact, I think, still, can those feelings be not true? Can they lie to me? Can they not be fact?
I think they can lie to us, yes. I think that this can be a very complex, complicated way in looking because our feelings are very complicated. Just think about the human body. God made us in his image and his likeness. I just asked him, wasn't it like dangerous for him to create something so much like himself, but giving us the option of whether or not to be good, whether or not to follow him, whether or not giving us that thing called free choice. Think about just the human body, the capillaries, the muscles, our eyes, how we see, hear, touch, smell, and all the different things that are going on in our body. And we don't have to think about breathing or our heart beating or digesting our food and all the different things. The complexity of the human body and emotions are an aspect of that. Human emotions are complex. And like back to what Dr. Caroline Leaf said about emotions is they're messengers. They're not supposed to be sitting in the driver's seat. That's not what they're sitting in the passenger seat or something. I don't know, probably a bad analogy using a car. I don't believe they're supposed to be the top in charge thing. We need to get skill in how to use them. Okay, I'm feeling this. Is it true? Why am I feeling this? Because there's a reason why we feel things. Like the fight or flight emotions or freeze or fawn. Those are the four ways to respond to things, to trauma and that. When you get triggered, you get stuck back in the fight or flight, freeze or fawn, but you're not there then. So it's like if you pause and say, why am I feeling this? If you start getting that skill, okay, I feel this. Why am I feeling this? Well, maybe it's because something happened. Maybe it's because you're thinking something. Maybe it's because you heard a song, you got triggered. There could be many different reasons why. So we need to pause and go, what is this feeling saying and why? What is this feeling trying to make me do? Is it coming from the past or is it coming from the now?
I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to say is that there are a lot of times I have encountered people who have said maybe they had a bad dad, a bad mom, those two parental units that were, again, supposed to nourish, guide, direct, challenge, whatever, instruct, give us the facts of life. And dad let us down. Mom let us down. They weren't there emotionally. They didn't fill up our cup emotionally. And so then we go on the search, Google, how to find an awesome dad, how to find a loving mom. I'm kind of being a little bit facetious, but in a sense, we kind of go on that search for that person. And then maybe we find it, let's say, in a pastor, because both of us are faith people. So we find it in a pastor and we're like, ooh, Pastor Jim is my new dad. And we want him to be that dad. We want him to fill that need. We want him to validate us. We want him to love us. We want him to do all that stuff. And we're like, well, a good dad's going to let me be in charge. A good dad's going to let me have these things. A good dad's going to see that I'm amazing and he's going to let me do these things. Well, wait a second. A good dad doesn't give us everything we want. He's not Daddy Warbucks. And even Daddy Warbucks didn't give us everything he wanted. We go into the cycle of, well, he didn't give me what I wanted. He didn't give me the emotional need that I wanted. He didn't give me whatever. And then we're like, well, I'm done with him. Write that check. Write it off. We're done. And we move on. And we're like, okay, that didn't work. Pastor Jim is now off the list. Let's see. I'm going to Google. My friend Tom is now my new dad. Okay, Tom, you're my new dad. Give me all my emotional needs. Do you see, as silly as this sounds, maybe, what's the damage if somebody keeps doing that, in your opinion? I know you're not a doctor.
They'll never get out of that because they're looking to someone else. And I love this quote by Carol Burnett. Only I can change my life. No one can do it for me. So you had a bad dad. My dad died on me. That was one of the things he did. It's not like he did it on purpose or anything. And other things, parents, they're going to make mistakes because they're human and they have their things. No, there is no such thing as a perfect parent. And once we get to adulthood, we have to take ownership for our own life. I am who I am today because of choices that I have made. Yes. What happened to me growing up happened to me. It affected me. But once I have the presence of mind to know this, it's up to me what I'm going to do with it going forward. I can forgive them, which I think that's the best thing to do. Forgiving people isn't about, saying they didn't do anything wrong. It's about untethering my heart from whatever they did. It sets me free from whatever they did. And there's a time to have people not in your life. There's a time you can also heal relationships if both parties are willing to do that. Someone who's going to, look for that good dad or whatever outside of themselves, you can't get a new dad. You had the one you had, and you're grown up now. You are up. Like the movie The Kid, we are up. And so you have to start there. Whatever your dad was or wasn't, it's past. You have to go from today. You have to heal your own heart today. And that's where having faith in God, in my book, Because You Matter, the subtitle is How to Take Ownership of Your Life So You Can Really Live. And I use my experience, but also the stories of 10 other people who I interviewed of things that they had been through and came out of and took ownership of their life so they could thrive in life, how they had to let go and how they had to take ownership and what did that even look like in their life. They call them daddy issues and mommy issues. And so if you have those, it's like a giant arrow pointing that you have something that needs to be healed, not someone you need to find and blame. Blaming is only good for a moment. Blaming is only good for a moment for you to identify the point of when the wound took place, and then you have to move on from there, or that blame will keep you stuck there forever. But if you will choose to take ownership, then you can move forward. You can heal all the different aspects of your life and have a different life, and even heal relationships that you couldn't have healed because you were too busy blaming somebody.
What I'm trying to figure out is that idea that even though this trauma happened, we can acknowledge that the trauma happened. We can acknowledge that it's even real, but we don't have to stay there. But I think that's the problem, is so many times, like a warm blanket, we want to stay underneath it and we don't want to come out from under the covers.
Well, that's people fearing change, because healing from trauma is going to be painful. It's going to encounter change. Change is part of the process, but we have change all the time. So if we can get someone to understand, change happens whether you like it or not. Trauma is change that took place that you didn't like. Healing is change that you will like, but it will be hard to get there.
Well, Danielle, as we start to wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity right now. How can someone best connect with you? And I know you have an array of materials, you have an array of books, but if there was one book in particular, so two-part question, how can people obviously connect? And then what book would you maybe recommend for them to check out with you first?
Well, my website is myname.com. It's DanielleBernock.com. It's BERNOCK, not how it sounds. I wanted to share this because of what you were saying. It's a quote in my book, Emerging with Wings. So I guess I'll say Emerging with Wings, my first book. A true story of lies, pain, and the love that heals. There's a quote in this book that has gone viral, been translated into all different languages, been put in people's PowerPoints, and people write me, can I put it in my book? I mean, it's been all over the place. And it really speaks to what we were talking about, I believe, about people getting stuck and holding on to it like a warm blanket. And this is how you come out from under the blanket. Trauma is personal. It does not disappear if it is not validated. devastated. When it is ignored or invalidated, the silent screams continue, internally heard only by the one held captive. When someone enters the pain and hears the screams, healing can begin. So someone has to take ownership of the truth that trauma took place. You have to call it trauma. You have to hear the pain. You have to hear your own screams. You have to validate this took place, call it what it is, and then you can start moving forward out of that. So to answer your question with the book, I said it once, I'll say it again though, but my book, Emerging with Wings.
That's a great quote.
Probably that's why it went viral. It is really why I do what I do.
I need to see that again. You got to send that to me.
Oh, you could Google trauma is personal and it'll come up. I am not overstating. It has. I've seen it in Polish and I don't even remember all the different languages I've heard it in. I get it in my email that another place I found it, another place I found it, another place I found it. I just got an email, was it last week, someone writing me asking they could put it in their book.
So here's my question. You wrote that, obviously.
Mm-hmm. That was a revelation to me. It was an epiphany. I reread my book recently before I did a keynote speech at a conference, and I hadn't done that in a while, and I kept putting it down and going, wow. I'm like, because this is way better than I could have written. I had never written a book before, had no idea how to write a book, didn't know what front matter was, back matter, or any of that stuff. Now I read all the things in the book. I used to not read prefaces and forewords, just like a lot of people, or note to readers. I read it all now because I understand what it takes for someone to write a book and pour their heart and soul into it. And I read this and I'm like, this is like way too good. I didn't write this. God wrote this and I happened to be there because I think it's phenomenal for my ignorance that I had when I was doing this book. I am amazed at it. And that quote was an epiphany in my life to own my trauma because I dismissed my trauma because I had people saying, how do you know this? And people dismissing it, people diminishing it. And I'm a baby boomer and my generation as a whole dismissed those things. Grew up with suck it up and get over it. Quit whining, quit crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. Sit down and shut up. Just get over it. And very harsh, authoritarian. And if it hurts, too bad. With the power of expletives. Your pain does not freaking matter. Who cares? Is about what it came across. And so to realize, no, trauma is personal. And no, I was never sexually molested. That is not part of my history. And that was part of why I couldn't validate all the other things, because somehow being beaten to the point that you have to go to the hospital or being molested, those were the only two ways I could see that that was really trauma. Losing multiple people through death, to me, I couldn't validate as trauma. Being shamed in front of an entire church as a child, in front of my first grade class as a child, being tore down by a bully that went to the heart of who I am, and so on and so forth. I dismissed them. They weren't big enough deal. Like you were saying, when someone says, you're just making a big deal out of nothing. I did that to myself. I didn't need anyone to say that to me. So when someone comes at you and says that, they got no right to do that, because trauma is personal. And if you don't deal with it, it will never go away. And trauma actually kills people, even though people do not understand this until they've gotten to the other side of it. It causes cancer, it causes diabetes, it causes heart problems. Medical science has documented this. If you don't deal with trauma in your life, it will deal with you in some way or fashion, physically. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's the truth.
I think that's so profound on so many levels that, again, somebody could cause that much pain in your life to say, you know what, I don't even want to be called by that name anymore. I don't even want to associate with that name. To me, that's fascinating. Have you been able to forgive this young lady that attacked you in that way, that made you want to change your name?
After the Lord pursued me and got me back to following him because I ran the other direction, the pain drove me there, and I tried to prove God didn't exist, but I failed because it's not true. Jesus talked about those who are forgiven much, love much. And I know I am forgiven much. So I am a person who is quick to forgive because of that. So yes, I forgave her a long time ago, long before I found out that she had died of a heroin overdose. And then that grieved my heart, because I'm like, there it is. What drove her into heroin that she ended up dying that way? What trauma was in her life that caused her to attack me in that fashion? I have no idea what was going on in her household.
Don't know what shoes she was wearing. I often say that. You don't really know. Well, Danielle, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate you giving us some moments today. It's so important, I think, to really hear someone out and really listen to their heart, because what are they ultimately saying? I think that's so valuable.
I loved our conversation. You got me to think about things, and I really enjoyed how we discussed things. It wasn't superficial like the, hi, how are you? A lot of times people aren't even listening for the answer, so you don't have to come up with a new line because it'll be gone by the time you come up with it.
All right, Danielle, so this is the silliness part of our show. So we've had some seriousness. I think it's only fair that we have a little bit of silliness, because, I'm kind of a silly guy sometimes. People have accused me of being silly, and sometimes it's accurate. Sometimes it's not accurate, but most of the time it is accurate. It's just a silliness that we like to call senseless, and it's the way we end the show. So I hope you're up for some silliness. Are you? I hope.
Yes, silliness is fun.
Okay, good. Silliness is fun. So here we are. So silliness is this, and we play. Now, again, I keep saying play, but we're not playing a game. There are no games on this show. There are never ever games. We don't play games with people. We don't trick people. We don't do any of that stuff. No games ever, because games almost imply like you win something, I was told once. And then somebody pushed back and said, well, you do win something. You win the gem of them being here. I was like, wow, that's very philosophical. So anyway, I know you're not a North Carolina fan, but I am. Everyone should know that. So anyway, here's my North Carolina cup. It's a broken vessel. I always like to show people that because I too am a broken vessel. So anyway, here we go. I'm going to roll for you. Ooh, my favorite one. So this is number 6. Now you might think, well, do we really have 6 senses? Some people have pushed on that. I'm not going to get into that great debate that will never end. But we have 5 senses, just so everyone knows. 6, apparently people say we do, but I don't know. I don't see dead people, so I don't have a 6th sense. Sorry, bad joke. And so anyway, here we are. You get to spend the weekend. Now, the weekend is defined, again, speaking of words and defining them. The weekend is defined as Friday at 3 p.m. till Sunday at 11:59. Get that last possible second in on the weekend. So you get to spend the weekend with one person. What do you do, and who's it with?
I would spend it with my husband.
The most obvious answer, right? What would you and Mike do together? Or Michael, I guess I shouldn't. I don't know him well enough. Maybe I can't call him Mike.
I call him Michael. He became Michael in our journey together. So he's chapter 3 in my book. What would we do? It'd be different every weekend, whatever we want to do. And we are so comfortable together. We laugh together. We do lots of things together. It would just depend. I mean, every weekend would be different. So to just say one weekend, I mean, he's my favorite person.
Oh, he's your favorite person?
Uh-huh.
Would you guys go to Ann Arbor together? Just asking for a friend, of course, not selfishly in any way.
Why? What's in Ann Arbor?
That's all right. It's the University of Michigan. It's fine.
Oh, yeah. I might be going there for a book signing in Ann Arbor in the spring or something. So
you
we'll
should. It's a beautiful campus, I've heard. According to Google, it's beautiful. I've never been to Ann Arbor, but I want to one day. Well, again, Danielle, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, guys and gals, kids and campers alike, that is it. That is all. That is our show today. Before we get out of here, though, I want to ask you a question. And this is really important to me. Really important to me. You'll find out more about it later on down the way. But right now, I just want to share this. When somebody comes to you and says, I feel hurt when, and then they just kind of share with their hurts. What's your first reaction? It's like multiple choice, the Scantrons. So we're getting out the Scantrons. You remember those? Some of you are old enough to remember that. Is it A, I'm going to fix this problem for this person? Is it B, I don't have time for this? Is it C, why are they still talking? Or is it D, I'm going to listen and I'm going to hear them? Which one is it? Now, if you need to know the right answer, the factual answer, it's probably not going to be found on Google. Just FYI. If you want to know the real answer, again, probably not going to be found on Google. But I'm really perplexed by this because I think so many times as people, again, when somebody vomit, I call it a word vomit, and I do it often. I always immediately end with whatever my word vomit ends, like when I finally take that breath, which I know is really challenging sometimes. I generally will say, oh, I'm really sorry I shared all that with you. And they're like, oh, it's okay. But then I feel bad. So I want to challenge you today. Can you just really look in your heart and really ask yourself that question? Like, what do I do in that moment? And let me know. I'd love to know. I really would. Inquiring minds want to know. You can let me know at opspodcast.com. You can let me know there. You can also let me know on our social medias at OPS Podcast Show on our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also leave a voicemail on our website. It's kind of fun too. Last thing before I let you go, I promise this is it. Do not ever forget. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned till next week when we walk in other people's shoes.